All right, homie. This is not quite as fancy of a video as I made before, but we're about to do it. A lot of people will say that a rolling Ollie is exactly the same as a stationary Ollie. It's not true. It's really not true. The movement absolutely affects the physics of the board, and it also affects like our psychology behind it, because it's scary. It's scarier to try to Ollie on a moving board, right? I'll talk about the psychology and how that affects, how things can go wrong because of that. But first I want to talk about the physics that are going on during an Ollie for a little bit, so you can kind of wrap your mind around why it's different. What happens when we pop the board like this, right? We push down with our foot, and the tail hits the ground. It creates this pivot point right here. In a stationary Ollie, what's actually going to happen, and it's why a lot of people think stationary Ollies are so difficult, is that there's a tiny bit of force that is exerted backwards. So your board in a stationary Ollie will actually travel like this. It'll go backwards and then forward and back down. It's very slight, and it only happens for a split second, but pushing this way on the tail will create just this slight backwards motion and come back up. Even if you're totally centered on your board, obviously it'll be exaggerated if you're pushing out that way, or if you're leaning too far forward, that backwards thing, which is why your front foot needs to be ready with tension going out that way on the nose, like that, to stop that backwards motion and pull the board up and out and back up, this way. When you're rolling and you try to do an Ollie, this still happens, except because there's already momentum going to the front of the board. When this happens, it doesn't really push the board behind you, but it does stop the board for a half a second. When the tail touches the ground, the board will stop its forward momentum, but you will not. Understand? That's why when you see someone pop an Ollie, like their weight will be right here in the center of the board, but then when they pop the Ollie, the board kind of moves back a little bit, and then their front foot ends up, their knee open, their front foot ends up being the center like this. So I'm gonna show you, right? So that's why there's like this Peter Pan stance that happens, because the board stops, your foot catches it this way, and pulls it out like that. On the one hand, this will actually make it a little easier to land the Ollie. It can, because you don't have to worry about the board moving backwards on you. And the faster you're going this way, the more it'll smooth out any mistakes that you make with your weight pushing one way or the other too far, because that forward momentum will really keep it kind of on its path for the most part. On the other hand, the same principle can make the rolling Ollie a little bit more difficult if you're not understanding these mechanics that are going on. I'm always almost hesitant to explain this, because what I don't want to happen is for you to think that because the board is stopping and you keep moving, that you need to lean one way or the other in anticipation of this. Actually, you are supposed to just Ollie the same way that you would stationary, but you have to be aware of the fact that it's going to feel a little different when you do it. So it becomes really important that your front knee is open and that there is a little bit of tension between your feet, outwards, not so much that, as soon as your front foot comes up, the board's going to pull way back that way, but a little bit that is supposed to happen, just a tiny bit. But that's not really what should be your mental focus, is, oh, I gotta jump forwards to compensate. Don't do that. So I think a big problem, psychologically speaking, with doing a rolling Ollie is, for some reason, like, our brains think that because we're moving faster, we need to do all the movements of the Ollie faster, which is not true. It's better to make an effort to slow down slightly, not be in a rush, not slow it down slower than a stationary Ollie, but just slow it down from what you might, think that you need to do. And make sure that you aren't popping too early. Don't pop before you're finished extending your legs into your jump. And because if you try to pop too early, and your weight is still on the board, or you just don't have enough momentum going up yet, so that the time in which your feet come off the board is really short, it's gonna be really hard to get a good Ollie out of it. You just won't have the time to get through the entire movement of kicking your leg out, and you're gonna have a tiny little rushed Ollie, or you won't even pop the board at all. You really wanna just relax, do the same sort of movement that you were before. If you can do it stationary, it's the same thing, but just make sure that you're really like almost at the height of your jump before you push that tail down and pick up your feet. The next important thing is going to be, in particular for the rolling Ollie, is after the pop to get that back knee up as quick as possible. It's gonna make a huge difference in how level that you're getting, because the biggest problem I see is people stopping like literally their back foot just stops their board from picking up. That's point one. Point two, and this is circling back around to the physics part of this, the force of your hind leg, the force of this knee popping up is going to help like recenter everything. You gotta recenter yourself after this initial pop. You gotta get your feet right back under you. So you really gotta work on picking up your back knee. And essentially what happens, and the ideal Ollie that's fully leveled and you got that karate kick out. So, we jump up, we pop, and we've got this foot under us like this little Peter Pan stance. And what we want to do is switch that foot out with this foot as quickly as possible after we pop. So it'll look like, see if I can do it, like, yeah. Imagine that there's like a pole or a string tying your legs together, so that as this leg comes out, this foot has to follow with it. You feel me? Yeah, like they're connected, Final thing is putting an obstacle out in front of you sort of help a lot with getting all the timing of that down, because it'll get your head, your eyes off of your feet and onto the obstacle in front of you. Why is that important? Because it affects the way that you bend your knees and straighten them back out. I'm gonna see if I can demonstrate from back here. If you are looking down at your board, you're gonna bend like this, which really means you're just like bringing your shoulder, you're like bending at the waist here, putting your butt out and your head, shoulders forward. And there's just a lot that can go wrong there. It means that when you jump, you might be jumping forward, you might be jumping backwards, and it's gonna kind of exaggerate on your board, mess up the whole flow of things. As opposed to looking out there, you bend your knees and you see how my shoulders stay pretty much over my board when I do that? Way easier to Ollie from there than from out here. See what I'm saying? Like, if I'm leaned back a little bit, not back so my shoulders are behind my board, but I really just try to keep them over my board so when I bend down, it's really all in my knees. I try not to bend my waist at all. And it helps to have something out there to look at out there. I mean, I'm not saying don't look at your board at all. I'm just saying that having an obstacle brings your awareness out there, and it really helps your posture in your Ollie. The final piece of advice I would say for learning rolling Ollies is actually to practice it on concrete that's not super duper smooth, because it'll give you a little bit more grip while you're getting used to it and learning it, and you won't be slipping out back and forth quite as often. If you do find yourself like there's times when I'm trying to Ollie right and I'll go to hop, and like before I even get to the pop or leave the board, I can feel that it's not right, and that I'm like I'm not like connecting with my board right, and it's gonna just fly out one way or the other. You got to slow it down. You got to take it back a couple steps and say, all right, I'm just going to work on like rolling and like bending up and standing up really quick and making sure that my board's not going every which way, and then slowing down that standing up and pop. So you make sure that you're not trying to pop here. Like you got to straighten really wait until you're actually jumping up to really hit that pop, yeah. Let me know how it goes for you, dude. Good luck.